This is Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from An Expat's Russia, where we answer your questions about what it's like to live, work, and travel in Russia.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of An Expat's Russia. Today we're going to talk about some of the more amusing superstitions that we learned about when we were living in Russia. Marcus, what's kind of one of the funniest ones that you think of, or first ones that comes to your mind?
The first one that I think of is you cannot whistle indoors, and you've heard of that one, right?
Yeah, of course. I think that's like one of the first ones that people warn you about.
So, I mean, I remember whistling as a kid all the time, right? And so, you're just whistling out of habit, and somebody tells you, hey, you can't whistle indoors, and you're like, you think it's a joke at first. So you're like, what? Why not? And you'll hear, if you go to Russia, you'll hear it several times, I think. It's one of those, common ones.
Right.
But
well, I think that like the whole aspect of it is like не сиди в доме, иначе денег не будет, or something like that, right?
Right.
Like
if
basically,
you
if you whistle
indoors,
inside, you won't
you'll
have
lose,
any money.
Your money will disappear in some way. And so I'm not very superstitious. I don't believe in, even some people in the U.S. I would say are superstitious.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, like a black cat runs across the street or something. But
Right.
I've heard things like that in the U.S. But these are Russian superstitions I've never even heard of before I went to Russia. So the whistle one is funny because not only because they're like telling you not to whistle, but the fact that kids don't grow up whistling is weird to me.
Right.
So
Of course,
that's a funny
all
one.
American kids whistling. Yeah.
Right. What about you?
Well, I think the strangest one for me is this idea of the domovyonak. Have you ever heard of that? Some people call it the domovoy.
No, I can't remember that I had.
Okay, so basically there's this superstition that there's this little creature that lives in your house and takes care of the house, and it's called a domovyonak. The first time I ever heard of it, I was in Ukraine, and there was like a little vent on the side of the wall, I guess for the like the stove vent. And there's like a noise coming from it. And I said, what is that? I asked my friend that I live with, and he says, oh, it's just the domovyonak. He's making some noise in there. And I was kind of still learning Russian at that point, and I was thinking like, domovyonak, what is that? Some kind of animal that's in there? Really,
why are you
like
not more
5 minutes.
Concerned?
I was. I asked him. I'm like,
No, I mean you're probably thinking to him like, why are you not more concerned if there's something in
Wow,
your
yeah.
vent? That's
yeah.
funny.
And so I asked him, like, what's this domovyonak? And he says, wow, he takes care of the house, does the chores when we're not around. And I wish I could have him come and explain because, well, if he remembers this story, because he probably saw the look on my face like, what is it? It was just complete shock. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, if you're looking for kind of funny stories, ask any Russian if they know what the domovyonak is. All of them know, everyone. But I think it's something that's not so widely known in the foreigner community.
Well, I
think
just
it's
asked
maybe
my
kind of
wife,
older.
and she's like, yeah, of course. And then she said there's some kind of cartoon based on that concept.
There is a Soviet cartoon, Domovyonak Kuzya is the name of it.
Uh-huh. Huh. Okay.
So
have you
maybe
ever
your
heard
kids
of...
have watched it. You'll have...
I'll have to turn it on for them, yeah. Have you ever heard of the one where this happened to me? Actually, I would say there's a lot of superstitions, but not all of them I've had experience firsthand. But this happened to me my second time I was in Russia. I was wearing a ring on my right hand, on my right ring finger, just a ring that I liked wearing, and some young kid was like, well, young, like maybe 18, 19.
Sure.
And he was like, are you married? No, he knew I wasn't married, so he's like, why are you wearing a ring on your right hand? You can't do that. I was like, what? Yeah. He said, if you wear a ring on your right hand and you're not married before you're married, you'll curse yourself and never get married. He's like, it happened to my sister. And I was like, I kind of commented, I was like, no, that's nonsense. And so
Right.
that's kind of a thing. But I haven't heard
Well,
that
what's
a
interesting
lot.
though, yeah, I don't think I've ever had someone say that. But we should note that in Russia, typically people wear their wedding rings on their right hand rather than their left hand, like we do
Right.
in
And
the U.S.
so, but if you wear, when I was in Russia, my wife and I wore it on the left hand. So if somebody noticed, they would think I was
Not
engaged.
married.
They would think I was
Sure.
not married, but maybe engaged. And they're like, "Oh, you're gonna get married, or like you're planning to get married?" I'm like, "No, I've been married for 2 years or something." And they're like, "Why aren't you wearing it on your right hand? You can't do that." So,
Yeah, that's
what's
funny. That's
what's another one that you can think of?
I would say probably the biggest one that I've seen that is maybe, I mean, not necessarily strange. Well, I mean, it's not something that we do in the United States, is taking like a seat or sitting down before you go on a long trip.
Uh
I don't know
huh.
about you, but my every time we visit my wife's family, when we're getting ready to leave, like they'll take us to the train station, and we have to sit down. Like everyone in the house just sits down for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 seconds, come in complete silence, and then we get
Yeah.
up and go.
So
And
I've heard of that,
it's
but I can't say that I've seen it firsthand.
yeah, I mean, it's
But it's
not just
quite
something that
common.
my wife's family does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like when I go to visit Russian friends in say a faraway city from Moscow where I lived, when I was getting ready to go, whether it was flying or taking a train, whatever, they'd say, "Okay, Matt, надо присесть на дорожку," like
You
to
need to.
sit for the road.
Yeah.
And
So
that was just
you,
kind of strange to me.
but if you don't do it, is there a consequence? Like
That's a great
whistling
question.
indoors will, your money disappears,
Yeah.
but if you don't sit
Right.
down, your train will crash or something.
Huh. No, I don't think there's any. Well, I mean, there must be some kind of consequence, right?
Right,
Because
right.
why would people do it? I don't know.
Huh.
If you're Russian, let us know in the comments. It would be interesting to know what the background is on that one. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that one's pretty widespread. Like most Russians do that. But you
Uh-huh.
said
Yeah,
Oksana, your wife doesn't.
so I've heard of, most of these, but I can't say Oksana isn't very superstitious at all, which is kind of surprising because I think
Sure.
most Russians have one of the, one or two of these little things. Like, what about the one where
Right.
you can't put money in somebody's hand? Like, you can't hand somebody money. They'll be like, "Hey, just put it
Yeah.
on the table or put it on the desk." That's kind of an odd one,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that was kind of strange when I went to Russia the first time in 2009. At every cashier, there was like this little plate
Right.
where she would put the money, and she would never hand you the money directly. So yeah, there's a
Yeah,
I don't
and,
know
and
again
especially
what
if
the
it's like
consequence is there.
change, you'd hold out your hand.
Yeah.
I'd hold out my hand, and they'd put it on the dish right next to it. I'm like, now I have to scrape it off the dish.
Right, right. Oh
So
gosh.
I did that for years, not knowing about this superstition. But people just don't want to hand you. I wouldn't say a lot of people. I would say more, maybe the older generation. In my experience, at least, they
Right,
don't
right.
they don't take
Yeah.
bills like directly from you.
Well, I would say the only real superstition that my wife has too is this присесть на дорожку, sit down before going on a trip.
Hmm.
Other than that, she's not superstitious either. But yeah, the
Hmm.
money one, that's also quite popular. I think you still see it. Maybe not so much in Moscow, but like if you go to a smaller city, definitely like where my wife is from when we go to visit, those little plates to put your money on are still there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
What about
anyway,
and that'd be interesting to see if it's a, big city thing or not, because my wife's from
yeah,
St. Petersburg, but I don't have too much experience in smaller cities. Um, so I mean, I lived in smaller cities, but I can't say that I was kind of. It was in the beginning of my trip to Russia, so I wasn't very attentive of those things. But another one that I thought was funny was if you forget something at home, you have to like
oh yeah,
retrace your steps. Like,
right,
let's say you forget your purse or your wallet or something. You retrace your
right,
steps, go back the same way. You can't like take another route or something. Go up, and you grab it off the desk or whatever, off, near the door or wherever you left
Right.
it, and you have to glance quickly in the mirror, like see yourself in the mirror for, I don't know, to avoid some kind of
Bad luck. of
bad
some
luck.
sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've heard of
Anyway,
that, right?
yeah. Absolutely. I always found it kind of interesting to learn about all of these superstitions. At first, it was kind of strange to me because, like you said, in America, there's actually lots of superstitions, right? Like knock on wood. People will knock on wood when they say
Right.
something they don't want to come true, or the black cat, or Friday the 13th. One thing that Russians mentioned actually about 13 is in the US, there's not a 13th floor in any building. But that's not a thing in Russia. You can have a 13th floor. So
Right.
even though I think they also have the Friday the 13th superstition
Uh-huh.
of it being a. But anyway, let us know in the comments other Russian superstitions that you've seen. We have a couple more that we want to talk about in another video, maybe dedicate a few videos to explaining some of the funny superstitions that we've encountered. This was Ask an Expat with Marcus and Matt from an Expat's Russia. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have a question about Russia, let us know in the comments. We'll answer it in another video.